Hi everybody, in this video I want to talk about how to hold the bat using the basic shake hand grip and just some of the mistakes to watch out for and try to avoid. Now the easiest way to hold the bat in the shake hand grip is to really shake hands with the racket. Now what does that mean? Easiest way to do this, hold the racket so that the edge of the racket is running up and down, and hold the racket so that the tip is pointing out to the side, and just hold it in your free hand, just like so. With your playing hand, hold your playing hand so that the thumb is out to one side and the index finger and other fingers are on the other. So just again like so, and let them point down towards the ground and shake hands with the racket, keeping the racket edge nice and vertical. So don't tilt it either way, just keep it straight up and down, point it out to the side, thumb on one side, index fingers on the other, and shake hands. How far you want to go up is just far enough so that your index finger is comfortably placed along where the rubber is here. So, and the thumb is usually placed, as you can see there's a little bit of a notch in the handle here. If I just go from the side, you'll see it a little bit better. There we go. Okay, great. So you can just see how the handles are made with a little notch on each side, and it's usually there to make it comfortable to put your thumb there. So again, just hold it nice and vertical, rest the thumb, the ball of your thumb just on one of these sides, index finger points down the other, and allow the racket just to remain pointing forwards, and you have your basic shake hand grip. Okay, some players will hold the racket a little bit further down the handle. It gives a little bit more wrist and some power at the cost of a little bit of control. And other players prefer to hold it very much up the handle towards the blade, gives a little bit more control at the cost of a little bit of wrist flexibility, so you reduce your power and spin. But they're perfectly acceptable variations. So what you should end up with is, if you're doing this correctly, holding it out, hand, fingers and thumb pointing down, shake hands and point it out in front. Your thumb runs down comfortably, not out, just let it run down so that it's sitting on that little pad. Index finger running downwards. You can see that for myself, I prefer to have my index finger running slightly slanted. Other players will have it very much so down, straight down. I'm just more comfortable there. It's again personal preference. But that's your basic shake hand grip. Now, to talk about some of the things to avoid, some of the simple things to avoid that can really compromise your game later on if you allow them to become a bad habit. One of the most common things that people do that should be avoided is try to avoid tilting the racket in your grip too much, either towards this way, which makes the forehand more powerful but greatly compromises the backhand. Whereas if you tilt the other direction a little bit, your backhand gets a lot better, but your forehand becomes much more awkward. It's harder to use good wrist. So try to avoid too much of tilting in one direction or the other, because the gains you make on one side are usually greatly outweighed by the losses that you lose on the other side that you play. So try to keep the racket pointing nice and vertical so that really it runs, the usual rule of thumb is run it so that it runs up the inside of your forearm and up the shoulder. And if you're tilting, that edge now is not running nicely up my forearm, it's running sideways. Now it runs again up my forearm. Okay. Other mistakes that are commonly made that should be avoided is try to keep your thumb down, don't let the thumb come up. This affects your wrist flexibility and makes it a little bit awkward to hit the ball with good angles. So that's to be avoided. It also means that quite often you can hit the ball with your thumb, so try to avoid doing this. Same with the index finger and the backhand. Although I like to have my index finger a little bit downwards and inside, so there is a bit of rubber showing there, don't have the index finger pointing right up the back of the bat. Okay, this will help the forehand to an extent, but it greatly compromises the backhand, and of course you're in great danger of hitting the ball with your finger. Some players will use this index finger here for their forehand, and then on the backhand they drop the finger down. So it's bring the finger up for the forehand, drop the finger down. It's probably better not to have to muck around with that and just leave your index finger where it is. Some players like to use two fingers on the backhand. Generally avoided it. It's not as firm a grip, and it does affect, it's not the worst thing in the world, but there's really no benefit to doing it, so I wouldn't recommend it. You usually get more wrist flexibility with only the index finger. Other players from time to time drop both the thumb and the index finger off the blade head itself and hold it in what's called really a hammer grip. The problems with a hammer grip is it does give fairly good flexibility. That's not really the biggest problem, although it's not perfect. The biggest problem for me, I think, with this, if you hold it this way, is that you lose the feedback that having your thumb on one side here and your index finger on the other, they give you feedback whether your racket angle is correct. Because if you tilt too much one way, if I tilt that way, my index finger can feel it. If I tilt this way, my thumb can feel it. But if I hold it in a hammer grip with no index, I can quite easily lose my racket angle and it doesn't feel much different. So try to avoid that. Okay. And those are the main grip mistakes. Probably one other thing to watch for that I used to do when I was young is when holding the racket, keep the racket relaxed so that it points out to the side. A lot of players hold it a little bit too firmly with the wrist, and as a result the racket head sort of points up at about 45 degrees. So they play the ball like that. And what that's a sign of is a wrist that's too firmly locked. The wrist should be relaxed so the bat can point out to the side and the ball played here, not up here. Because by relaxing I can get better bat angles and better wrist usage. By holding the bat up there, I tend to reduce my wrist flexibility. And that's really pretty much it. So just finally, just to recap how to hold it, just hold it pointing in front, just like so. Let your thumb point and index fingers and fingers point down. Shake hands with the racket. Thumb runs down on this side, index finger runs down on that side, and when you just have it nice and relaxed pointing out in front, the racket angle should be vertical, running up your forearm, and from a side view the racket head shouldn't be held up but should be relaxed. If you do that, you're not going to have too many problems, and you'll have a good basic grip, shakehand grip, that will work for you through the years and won't require changes later on when you discover that you've developed bad habits.